The Top Floor Please podcast, where women in leadership rise together. I'm your host, Melissa McCormick, executive coach and founder of the Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. This is your space to find clarity, grow in confidence, and lead with bold authenticity. Whether you're navigating the boardroom, building your team, or stepping into new territory, you're not alone. Let's talk real challenges, real growth, and real leadership because the top floor isn't just a place, it's a mindset. Alrighty then, let's get started.
Hey there, everyone. Just a question I'm just going to open up with today. Are you ready to be the one who decides? Are you ready to be the one who decides in the room? Because there's a moment in every leader's career when something shifts. The conversation may end, the room gets quiet, people look around the table, and then they look at you. Not because you have the best ideas in the room, but because you're the one now responsible for the decision. Influence, we talked about influence last time. Influence got you here. But leadership at the executive level requires something more. It requires the willingness to step into responsibility, even when that path forward isn't perfectly clear. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Top Floor Please podcast. I'm Melissa McCormick. I'm executive coach, leadership advisor, and founder of the Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. I work with leaders who are buried in the day to day. Back in the day, I wanted to argue cases in the courtroom. I traded that courtroom for the boardroom, worked 32 years in corporate America, and now I am helping leaders get out of the weeds, right? I'm helping leaders, director level above, primarily in my one-on-one coach executive coaching program, trying to get them to run the business versus the business running them. If you can resonate with that at all, like your day is going, you're Mach 5 with your hair on fire constantly, I'm helping control the chaos. I promise you I won't get rid of the chaos, but I will help calm it and calm you. So today we're going to start a new series focused on leading at the executive level. Last month on the podcast we talked about influence without a title, because influence is often where leadership begins, right? That's where you're going to start showing your executive presence, and we can lead without a title. I believe that everyone is a leader at some level, and whatever level you are, you can lead within that position. So if you haven't heard those podcasts, please go back and listen to them. There's some really great nuggets in there. Now, you notice that, problems. So influence is where that leadership begins because you start to notice problems that are often overlooked, right? Other people might be like, whatever. That's kind of, that's just the way it's always been. And you're like, yeah, but is it right? Right? Isn't there a better way? Isn't there an issue? Can't we resolve this, right? You're offering ideas that move things forward, and then people start coming to you for input. Influence builds credibility. Now, at some point in a leader's career, especially once they reach the director level and above, something changes. And that is that influence alone is no longer enough. Because at the executive level, leaders are no longer just contributing ideas. You're responsible for the direction. Okay. Early in your career, leadership often shows up through contribution. You're rewarded for being the one who solves problems, the one who jumps in when something isn't working, the one who jumps in to offer a solution when everybody else is just standing there looking at each other, right? Have you felt that before? Organizations love people like that. But the leadership expectations, they begin to shift once someone moves into senior leadership roles. The job changes, of course, but you're no longer there to simply contribute. You're there to create clarity for others, clarity in priorities, clarity in decisions, clarity in where the organization is going next. And many strong leaders struggle with this transition. You're comfortable. You're in your comfort zone when you were, doing your sales thing or doing your finance thing or whatever it was that you were really good at. And then you get this opportunity to be a member of the senior leadership team. And now you're like, okay, but I kind of really like that. And so you go back, right? You don't mean to, but it just kind of you naturally flow back there. Yeah. Many leaders struggle with this transition. And it's not because they aren't capable, of course, but because the habits that made them successful earlier in their career, like I was just talking about, right? You tend to kind of go back. Those habits or those successful skills that you had, they don't always translate to executive leadership, right? You might have been early in your career, you might have been the person with the answers. Like that was the way I was when I was the supervisor of the order entry department, international shipping department. Um, I knew I just kind of knew how everything worked, who to contact, da 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 da. And because I was that kind of personality and I just got things done, like I was a problem solver by nature, because of that, people just gravitated to me. Like if they didn't know what to do, well, we'll ask Melissa. I kind of liked it. Right? I liked being the go-to person. I liked being the person who, at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I really made an impact today. I helped people. I served people. I answered questions. I got them on their way when they were stuck. But at a director level, your value comes from bringing alignment across teams, not just, being air traffic controller and telling everybody where to go and what to do. It's bringing alignment across teams. And as leaders move toward that vice president or executive level, that expectation becomes even clearer and even greater. You are responsible for making decisions that move the organization forward, not just your department, the organization. And sometimes without perfect information, sometimes while navigating tension between departments or with customers, and sometimes while balancing competing priorities. Yeah, they all matter. But what are we going to do first? That's the leadership shift. And it's a big one. Yeah, it's a super big one. So I wanted to talk about this today because this has been kind of coming up in my world and it's something that I think many leaders don't realize. And that is that executives are always watching leadership signals. Okay. So what you might not realize is that in the day to day, the executives, your current executives, they're watching leadership signals in all of the employees, everybody that they interact with, right? Long before those promotions are discussed, long before there's sticky notes put up on the wall. They're watching performance. Of course they are. But they're not just watching performance. They're watching how leaders think, how they handle complexity, how they respond when things don't go according to plan. And one of the biggest signals executives watch for, do you think beyond your department? I call it executive thinking. No, I don't. I call it enterprise thinking. I'm sorry. Executive presence and executive thinking. I call it executive thinking. I keep saying that. Okay. This podcast is going to be all right, but we're moving forward on this one. I'm not going to re-record it, right? Um, I'm human, and you guys laugh with me, please, not at me. All right, so we're talking about enterprise thinking, not just how does it affect my group, not working in the silos that typically happens, especially with organizations that were kind of a smaller organization and now they're getting larger because life is going so fast and there's so much new stuff and there's so much more stuff that we have to do, we tend to work in silos and we tend to work by department and not really looking like we got blinders on, right? Because we have so much to do that I just do. And I'm not looking to the right or to the left or even thinking about what decisions I make are impacting downstream, upstream, all around the streams, right? And so, leadership, members of the executive team, they're looking for people who are actually looking outside of their department. Where, how does this decision impact the overall company, right? How does it impact operations? What does this mean for finance? How does this impact the customer experience, right? You could be in the service department and you're thinking about financial ramifications, right? If we make this decision on and accept this warranty claim, what does that do to the overall financial health of the organization? Does it set a precedent? How do we handle other customers? Things along those lines versus, just really focused on how does it impact my department or my team? Does this create problems somewhere else in the organization? That's the big question. And the leaders who advance are the ones who begin thinking across the enterprise, not just within their own function. I hope that makes sense, right? That shift becomes very visible to senior leadership when they realize, oh, and it's based on the questions that you're asking, it's based on the suggestions that you're offering. When they can see that, look, she's just not thinking about the sales department, or she's just not thinking about project management and how it impacts project management, or purchasing, or finance, or, fill in the blank. But there's something about this transition that doesn't get talked about very often. So I just want to kind of lean into this a little bit. And that is this: leading without a title, that can feel kind of awkward, right? You're like, you've got ideas, you've got opportunities, you're influencing decisions, and you know that, but you're not always sure how far you can go. You're thinking, okay, how much do I say? Is this my place? The president of the company's in the room. Should I really speak up? Do I have the authority to push this? Like if somebody higher than me pushes back, do I have the authority to push a little bit further? There's a tension there because you're like, well, is it really my role? Is it really my place? But then something shifts, right? You get the title. Now you're the vice president of sales. And now that awkwardness is replaced with something else. Wait. Because now people aren't just listening to your ideas, they're looking to you for decisions. They're waiting for your direction. They're expecting clarity. That can feel super heavy, that responsibility, right? The same leader who once wondered, is this my place to speak? Is now, it's my responsibility to decide. Yeah, that's a lot. That is heavy. There's a weight of that, right? You've got vice president of sales or vice president of finance or vice president of operations on your business card. And you go to a networking event and you hand your business card to somebody and they go, "Oh, you're vice president of operations. That's really awesome. Tell me about your role. What do you like about it? What you don't like about it?" And you're thinking, I don't even know. This is like 2 weeks old. I don't even know what to say, right? I mean, when people see that title, there's a weight that comes with it and an expectation, and you might feel that. So it's just something that I wanted to be sure that I add because talk about it. Like we all want to get to that. I shouldn't say we all, but many of us want to get to whatever it is that we want to get to. And then when we get there, it's kind of a holy smokes moment of, oh, wait a minute. I don't exactly know everything that I'm supposed to know. And so anyway, there's a weight with that as absolutely. So I often say leadership doesn't get easier at the next level, right? It's lonely. The saying that's lonely at the top is around for a reason because it really is. And when it's lonely, it's also heavy. So let me just share this story with you that I have not told to many people, and I'm going to keep it generic because it's not necessary to know when or who or some of the details behind it. But it was a challenge for me. So I was responsible. I was in the sales department at the time, and I was responsible for a large account of ours, and great customer. And we supplied one of our machines to them, and there was some quality challenges with it. We were standing behind the issues. That's one thing that we absolutely, that was our core value. We're going to stand behind our product no matter what. And that is what we did. The challenge was is this had been going on for like 3 years. And so I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, okay, wait a minute here. This isn't all our issue. There were some operational changes as well that were going on. And so we were at a point where, okay, we've fixed everything. We just had some units in the field that needed to be that needed to be refurbished, and we should be good to go. But the warranty claims or the questions kept coming in, and at some point we had to stop it. So I went to my leadership and said, okay, this is where I'm at. These are the numbers. This is how much it is. This is what I want to propose. And they're like, yep, 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 let's do that. So I did. Now, where I messed up was I didn't call. I mean, this was a big deal. And I didn't call first to give my contact a heads up. I sent an email. And I sent an email because I wanted it to be in writing, but I also sent an email because I was too chicken to give them a call. Um, I don't know if you resonate with that at all. But what happened is it backfired on me. The president of our customer, the customer's president at the time, gave our president a call, and we got summoned to headquarters to talk about it. And although I was right, and it wasn't about being right, I knew that it was not about being right. It was about my approach, and it could have definitely been handled a lot better than the way I handled. I mean, I learned a ton out of how to manage um, situations like that are going to kind of go sideways, but I didn't expect it to go as far sideways as it did. We ended up end of the story. We ended up uh, uh, working out an agreement so that we could move on and everything was fine. But if I wouldn't have brought it up, right? So I was that leader um, without the big title. I didn't have a big title, but I was the leader who brought it up. Nobody else would bring it up. Everybody knew we needed to resolve this, but time just kept going by and kept going, kept going on and on and on. So I brought it up. The lesson I learned was that my approach totally stunk. And it did cause some problems, and it totally caused ripples throughout both organizations. And again, I had some damage control to do, so I definitely don't recommend you do what I did. But the reason I'm mentioning this to you is that if I wouldn't have brought it up, because I'm thinking enterprise, I'm thinking, okay, this is impacting our organization as well as our customers' organization at certain levels, and we really need to get together and talk about how do we reach a solution. So my whole point in bringing that up is that once you reach that executive leadership level, that responsibility is it isn't just to make the right decision for your team. It's for you to make the right decision for the organization. Just work on your approach. And there's plenty. You could read my book on grace and salt and how to do something a little bit differently than I did back in the day. So now influence helps move ideas forward, right? But leadership carries something else. It carries responsibility. So my influence did help move situation forward with our customer, right? But leadership took the responsibility of both parties to figure it out. Responsibility for those outcomes, responsibility for direction, like what's next, responsibility for that impact that your decisions have across the organization. And sometimes that responsibility, it shows up in ways that leaders do not expect. Like, for example, something, I kind of say this from time to time that I often see in organizations that small exceptions create large consequences. What do I mean by that? Well, a leader makes one small exception to help someone out, right? Feels reasonable at the moment, but the exception quietly creates a precedent. Excuse me. That exception quietly creates a precedent. Of course it does. And suddenly the organization is navigating a standard that was never intentionally created. I mean, it kind of is what happened with my situation with my customer that I just talked about. So executive leaders become very aware of this. Like when you're making decisions, I just had a workshop on negotiation for operations teams where you've got your guardrails, but your guardrails can bend a little bit, right? So how do you negotiate within there? And so we talked a bit about not executive, enterprise thinking. We talked a bit about when you're making those decisions, who does it impact? When you're making it, it solves your problem, but who does it impact downstream or upstream? Does that make sense? Yeah. And also then what's the risk for the overall organization? What's the precedent that we would be setting? That's when leadership moves from influence to accountability. So, for leaders who are stepping into greater responsibility or who are already operating at the director level or beyond, there are three shifts that become critical. So, I wanted to provide you some value in this podcast versus just lecturing to you. So, like that shift number one is you want to think enterprise, not department. So, be thinking about that. Okay, how am I managing my day-to-day decisions? Excuse me. Early leadership, that success often comes from building that team, right? And that totally matters. Executive leadership requires something broader, something bigger. And that's the enterprise thinking. Because at executive level, success is no longer measured by how well one department performs. It's measured by how well the organization performs. So, what does that mean? You're going to ask different questions. You're not just going to say, what helps my team? You're going to say, what helps the organization move forward? And sometimes that means making decisions that don't perfectly benefit your department. Like it might mean you're going to have to take on extra work, even though you know you don't have the bandwidth or the people. But if it helps the greater good, then we do it. And executives, they notice leaders who naturally think this way. It's one of the clearest signals someone is ready for greater leadership responsibility when they start thinking like that. Okay, so that's shift number one, right? It's enterprise thinking. Shift number two is you're going to provide clarity, not just ideas. What does that mean? Well, that means that many leaders are excellent at generating ideas, right? You've been in those meetings where it's like, hey, let's do boom, 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 boom. And everybody else is going, oh, great. That's one more thing that I have to put on my plate because they're not going to be executing it. I'm going to have to do it, right? They're brainstorming ideas. They see the opportunities, but those organizations, they don't move forward on ideas alone. They move forward, on clear decisions. So one of the greatest gifts that an executive leader can give their team is clarity. Clarity about priorities, clarity about direction, clarity about what matters most right now. Like what matters most right now. Teams can work through uncertainty. They can. And they can adapt to change, but what slows that organization down more than anything is unclear direction. Executive leaders bring clarity that allows others to move forward. Okay. So that second shift. So the first shift is all about enterprise thinking. The second shift is providing clarity. Now, the third one, this is a big one. The third one is owning the outcome. Like it's all about ownership. Influence contributes to results. Executive leaders owns them. Like executive leadership owns them, which means stepping into responsibility, even when the outcome is uncertain, yikes, even when the decision isn't popular, even when the path forward isn't perfectly clear. Ownership builds trust. Teams begin to see that their leaders aren't just participating in decisions, they're accountable for them, right? That they have a safe space, that if this goes south, if this doesn't work, my leaders, they've got my back. Accountability creates stability across the organization, right? I mean, go back to my customer story and of my terrible approach, but it was important that I step forward and talk about that. That accountability, our organization took accountability and took ownership. I took ownership of how I botched up the communication, right? I mean, I really got sent to the woodshed, if you will, when we went to the customers. We all got summoned there, and I literally was on the chopping block. Now, I wasn't going to be fired. I wasn't that kind of chopping block. But it was a serious conversation. But taking accountability and ownership, that was important. And I had to do it. And our company did it as well. Those are the moments where leadership becomes visible. Yeah, it's not in the titles, it's not in the organizational charts, it's in the way leaders show up when decisions matter. Okay? So the first shift, I want you to be thinking about this. The first shift, executive presence. Executive presence. Enterprise thinking. Here I go again. This whole podcast should be re-recorded, but I'm not going to because you guys know I'm human and I've got this thing going on. I got a cold again. So, but we're doing this thing. So, shift number one, enterprise thinking, company thinking, organizational thinking, thinking top, right? I get some people get confused when I say enterprise. I mean your company. I need your company thinking of the overall company instead of silos or thinking about yourself. Shift number one. Shift number two is providing clarity, right? You want to provide clarity on priorities, on decisions, on direction. And number three is ownership. Own the outcome. Accountability. Own it. So before we close today, I just want to leave you with a question to reflect on. So you can get your Grace and Salt journal out and just be thinking about this. Leadership always feels exciting when we're contributing ideas, right? We're offering influence, helping move things forward. But at some point in every leader's career, that moment changes and this discussion ends. The options have been laid out. Everyone in the room turns towards the leader, not for an opinion, but for a decision. Because leadership eventually requires something influence never did: responsibility, right? Responsibility to weigh the information, responsibility to consider the overall organization, and responsibility to move forward even when the path isn't clear. So here's the question I want you to think about this week. Are you ready to be the one who decides? Let me say that again. Are you ready to be the one who decides? Not because you have every answer, but because leadership means stepping forward when the organization needs clarity. All right. Next time on Top Floor, I want to give you a little sneak peek to what we're talking about next. We're talking about when the leader becomes the bottleneck, why it happens, how leaders intentionally create it, and what executive leaders do differently. So, if today's episode resonated with you, I'd like to invite you to do three things. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode if you haven't already. Share this episode with a leader who may be stepping into greater responsibility or wants to. And if something resonated with you today, like something stood out, I'd like you to send me a message. Let me know. I always appreciate, hearing how those conversations show up, how these conversations show up in your leadership. After all, as you know, I work with those leaders who are buried in the day-to-day. I help them simplify things, get out of the weeds, start running the business instead of the business running them. Leadership at an executive level isn't about having perfect answers. It's about having the courage to step forward when the decision is yours. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep leading with grace and salt.
Thanks so much for hanging out on the top floor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a little boost, share it with your friends to keep the momentum going. And hey, if you're ready to rise, find your voice, and lead with clarity and confidence, we'd love to connect with you. Reach out at graceandsaltleadership.com to learn how Grace and Salt can support your growth. Remember, you don't have to lead like everyone else, just lead like you. All right, I'll see you next time on the top floor.